Hello and welcome to the EcoCast. Today's topic is exploring innovations in networking. My name is David Davis of ActualTech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator for today's event. On this event, you'll hear from experts at Open Systems, Gigamon, SolarWinds, Flexential, and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Thank you so much for joining us on this event. We've got a great show lined up for you today. If you haven't been on an EcoCast before, you should know that we at ActualTech Media created the MegaCast and EcoCast event series to help educate IT professionals such as yourselves about the latest and greatest in enterprise technology to help you do it from the comfort of your office or home and to help you to get all your questions answered. We want this to be an educational event, so we encourage you to use the questions box there on your audience console. We'll have dedicated Q&A sessions with each of our presenters after each presentation, so we encourage you to get your questions in early, and we'll do our best to answer every question that comes in. I see hundreds of people already on the event saying hello, good morning. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. Thank you so much for joining us on the ActualTech Media EcoCast. Now, before we get into it, just a few things. I mentioned questions. We want this to be educational. Use that questions tab. Also, we have some poll questions for you throughout the event. We want this to be a social event. I'll be tweeting about the event. I'll talk about the hashtag for today's event in just a moment. You can tweet directly from the bottom of your audience console using the Twitter icon, and the hashtag will be automatically appended. We also have resources there in the Handouts tab that you can download. We have PDFs, we have ebooks, we have links directly to our sponsors' solutions on the event. So make sure you check those out. And finally, some of you might have heard we have some prizes. So let's talk about those. In fact, we have 3 Amazon $500 gift cards to give out on today's event to 3 lucky winners. If you're watching this event on demand, I'm sorry the drawing has already occurred. The primary requirement to be eligible for these are that you must be present on the live event. There are some other prize terms and conditions that you should be aware of. You can find those in the Handouts tab, the link to ActualTech Media prize terms and conditions. All prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to ActualTech Media. Now, through the EcoCast and MegaCast event series, we have donated thousands of dollars to charities thanks to generous attendees who win prizes and opt to donate their prize value to charity. We've been supporting the Diane Fossey Gorilla Fund and the One Tree Planted charities in partnership with the Gorilla Guide Book Club. You can find Gorilla Guide at gorilla.guide, and you can download tons of free electronic ebooks directly from that site, so make sure you check it out. There's no cost for any of the Gorilla Guides on there, and there's tons of educational resources that you might be interested in. The hashtag for today's event is ATM EcoCast. You can follow ActualTech Media on Twitter, and you can follow me on David M. Davis as well. You can subscribe to the ActualTech Media social media on YouTube, Facebook, and the 10 on Tech podcast, as well as our LinkedIn page. Make sure you follow us on LinkedIn for our latest and greatest content. Now, before we jump into it with our first presenter, a couple things I want to first cover. One is the state of enterprise networking, and then we'll have a poll question right after this. So when it comes to the state of enterprise networking, just to do a little bit of level setting here, I'm sure most of you as IT professionals who've been around for a while know that, in the past, networks were very static. They were single vendor. You brought in one vendor. You standardized on that. There was a lot of manual configuration. You go to the CLI. You telnet or SSH. You do your configurations. These were very costly to maintain. A lot of maintenance contracts, very expensive hardware, all hardware focused and very complex. You had a dedicated staff, the networking team who took care of all that. But today, expectations are much higher, and fortunately, there are new innovative networking solutions, many of which you'll learn about on the event today, because enterprise networks are dynamic. They need to change. They need to adapt to new applications. You have microservices. You have cloud-based services. You have software as a service and APIs and all sorts of data is just being transmitted across the network from multiple data centers and multiple clouds and mobile devices and remote edge locations. And companies are using a lot more best-of-breed solutions. There is a lot more automation, hopefully, and a lot more focus on making these things cost-effective, software-focused, and security is a tremendously high priority. So on this event, I hope that you really enjoy what you see today, because you'll be educated on what, in my opinion, is the latest and most innovative networking solutions available to you to help modernize your network. We want to help you get answers to all your questions and find solutions to help make your network more efficient, more performant, more reliable, and more secure, and potentially more affordable as well. So thank you so much for joining us on the event. Before I introduce our first presenter, I've got a poll question for you. You should see in the slides window there a question. It says, what is your time frame for adding new or replacing existing networking solutions at your company? And while you answer that, I will respond to many of these comments and questions that are coming in. Hello from Tennessee. Hello from Connecticut. Brian asked, will the EcoCast be starting soon? Yes, we are starting right now. Angie says, good morning. Always good to have you on the event today. Thank you, Angie. Ross said, good morning. John said, hello from Atlanta. So many good comments and questions coming in. We'll be responding to all of these. So thank you, everyone who responded to that poll question. I do appreciate it. And with that, I'm excited to introduce our first presenter on today's Networking EcoCast. That is Moritz Mann, Head of Product Management at Open Systems. Take it away, Moritz.
Thank you, David. Let me quickly welcome you everyone to this EcoCast live event. Today, I want to talk about innovations in networking. And actually, to have a closer look at what that means and what triggers actually innovations in networking, we have to start what is actually the underlying movement. And the digital transformation is one of the key, or the major factor that's driving a change in the infrastructure and the networking as we see it and do it today. So when recently there was a research being done by Zeus Keravala, most of CIOs said and organizations said that they are actually in the form in full swing in digital transformation. But the core underlying issue of that is that also the CIOs were not sure how their industry will look like and how they will do business even in 2020. So meaning from a perspective of last year to this year. Now, but also an underlying topic is, of course, companies are feeling that technology and digital transformation is also a big fear factor for being disrupted by new business models. And also, 71% of the businesses saw new competitors emerge in the same market. And let me quickly drill down a bit on that and what this means. So the cloud is driving the transformation. That is clear. We see growth rates above 18%, and this in a market. If you look in the future, that is already at a 240 to 300 billion plus addressable market size. So in the absolute numbers, a double-digit growth is sheer breathtaking. And also one key finding was when we look at the data is that the rest of the IT is driving only 3% of the overall budgets and growth. And it sees, it shows you where this is driving towards. But why is it the case? So what is good to understand is that the recent surveys also show that 70% of all the enterprises see hybrid as a dominant strategy in terms of handling the adoption of the cloud and also not trying to limit the adoption of the cloud. So most of the companies say, let's keep a virtual private cloud for our legacy and critical data sets, and also use then the public cloud or multiple public clouds for the agility and also the reach that these clouds deliver. If you look then under the hood, you see there are two common factors that actually put a great challenge on enterprises, which is, so on the one hand, you have to run the business, so migrating what you have into infrastructure service platforms. But on the other hand, there's also a factor in a big push towards transformation of their own business, because they feel the disruption and they want to be in the advantage, in the lead of the disruption. And this is where the transformation happens in mostly cloud native environments. And it affects every industry. And as I always, there are winners and losers, but a key trend is by adopting the cloud, you need to have the developers but also the infrastructure and the architecture to actually leverage the benefits of the cloud. If you look across all industries, you see that there's a surge in developer headcounts across all industries. And if you then look on the winner side, you see that actually leveraging the cloud to your benefit is becoming a major success factor that is on the one hand also very much dependent on your ability to find the right resources, but on the other hand, you have to have the right infrastructure. Nowhere as visible as that is that the current infrastructure are still built most of the time around data centers. And this applies to the networking side. This also applies to the security side of things. So networks today are highly infrastructure centric still. They are still the perception of the good old perimeter. But reality is that your users are most of the time already are circumventing those classical infrastructure by using the path of least resistance to go into the cloud and connect to the cloud. So it's not any longer an IT driven cloud adoption, but also a business and even user led IT adoption, which leads to a lot of question marks, but also open challenges in terms of security, also business availability guarantees, because in the end, IT still owns that problem. And in the same time, also in terms of how do you build a new type of network and perimeter to get to this. So to understand what the underlying issue is that most of the enterprise networks today look like this. They either have an MPLS that is most of the time focused on very rigid lines that are centered around data centers. There are limitations to in terms of bandwidth and in terms of also architectural flexibility. Whereas on the other side, companies that went to a direct internet only approach now face the issue that they have to manage all these ISPs in order to get the performance to get to the cloud. Also is that when you migrate then to SD-WAN, you still have all the good old kind of issues that is actually generated or actually a factor by using multiple regional ISPs, because you still have the physics and the last mile problems in the equation. That means you still have to deal with line outages, packet loss, inter-regional, inter-continent peering issues. And this is not solved, but just optimized by SD-WAN. So in a nutshell, SD-WAN 1.0 will not solve kind of all these problems for you, because in the end, standard classic SD-WAN will provide with a lot of flexibility. It will allow you to lay over a SD-WAN routing fabric between your edge devices and your edge sites. to reach your cloud providers. But the issues are, it's becoming more and more problematic to have a good path to these applications, because there's no common optimized backbone. You cannot reach all the edges. So what about your end users? And one of the key factors that we see is that most of the classic vendor strategies were that there's no integrated enterprise security in those solutions. If you then add additional security appliances or products or service change into the equation, you will still end up again with this good old MPLS model, where you have several service exit points or internet breakout points in your network, where you then again pile a bunch of security appliances or functions to actually control the traffic going to infrastructure service, but also to SaaS applications. So again, what we see often is that in network terms, that these classic bottlenecks are then being re-entered. So what has changed actually that will change how we look at networks today? So what has changed is actually that AWS, Azure, GCP, but also other major cloud service providers have massively invested in the range of double-digit billions over the last years into their networks to make them more accessible, to make their resources and their cloud workloads more accessible. So this is a big paradigm shift that we've also talked already about, but I want to emphasize it again. The network is becoming the cloud. So there is a convergence happening between the network, that is between your sites, between your users, between your factories, between your point of sales, and where your applications are being delivered. And this will change a lot of things, how we look at networks today. Let's drill down on this. So if you look, for instance, at Azure Virtual WAN, in comparison with other cloud network access points and cloud backbones that are now being opened to enterprises and service providers and platforms like ours, we have to understand that they have a different vantage point on how they actually connect sites. So if you look at the different differences amongst the cloud providers, you will see that there's always a cloud segment, a middle segment that's in between your clients and the cloud network. And then there's a client access network segment, which is usually, these are the ISPs or the networks that are directly connected to your site or to your laptop or your GSM or 4G operator, mobile operator. So if you look at AWS, and this was based on the 1000 Eyes report, which I can highly recommend, you can see that actually the clients are closer not to the cloud, but they still have a lot of internet and autonomous systems and availability zones to pass until they actually get on the Amazon backbone. If you now compare this to the Azure environment or the Azure backbone network, you will see, and this is represented in the large green cloud segment, is that from these vantage points, and this is just an example, it is true over between several regions and also client segments, that the traffic enters the Azure backbone much earlier than in comparison with other providers. So one of the key innovations is Azure Virtual WAN, where it is key to be as close as possible to your sites. So the cloud edges, the cloud backbone moves extremely close to the sites or edges that are present, also including endpoints like your tablets, mobiles, and laptops. And this is done by this distinctive and deliberate strategy of AWS, and especially here in this case Azure, to put these edges and these regions closer to the edge sites. We also see that the interregional traffic, depending on your cloud architecture design, will actually stay much more in the same region. And Azure will also make sure, and this is also true for other cloud providers like AWS and GCP, is that they will use the cold potato routing. That means that they will make sure that once a packet or a connection is in their backbone, that it will try everything to not route anything over the internet back to another region. Yes. So how can we bring this all together? And what we've seen as a good strategy that has now emerged, and it's actually a new category that abstracts the layers between the endpoints, the edges, and the cloud, is actually SASE, or Secure Access Service Edge, which has been defined by Gartner. So what is it in a nutshell? It's actually the convergence of network as a service functions and network security, which is one of the key imperatives in the new reality. If you think beyond the classic perimeter, that is delivered through one platform as a service. And I would like to use the remainder of this session now to quickly go through you and educate you on what this means and what are the pitfalls and the advantages, of course. So the drivers for SASE, as mentioned, is the rise of mobility along the rise of the cloud. What we've seen initially is that you have more and more end users that are on the road. Businesses are doing work from home or in different setups right now. And this is also due to the fact that businesses need to become much more agile to meet and outperform their competition. What it also means is that the endpoints and the apps and the data in a nutshell are everywhere. So when you still thought your good old server in the rack, in the cellar, in the basement, in one of your data centers, the data is now also being shared, including very critical data sometimes in all kinds of different SaaS or infrastructure or partner collaboration tools. What we also see as a classic driver for SASE is that the classic security parameter is irrelevant because it just introduces bottlenecks and it's not reflecting the reality anymore. So what are we trying to solve? How do we support any-to-any dynamic access requirements, meaning from any client that comes to, that wants to access their cloud resources or even on-prem resources anywhere, wherever they are with any device, while enabling also the IT to enforce the security on the way to meet their compliance standards, the regulations, but also reducing the threat surface, but because these things don't go away. And of course, this should work with a very good user performance and user experience, actually with a better one than with the old existing architectures at hand. So how does SASE address the problem? So for one, there's a multi-endpoint support. This means that all types of edges are needed and supported by SASE, ranging from your mobile phone up to a very highly mission critical business site or a factory or production site in your network. It also means that directly backhauling, like any remote users access those resources via your sites, is kind of a thing of the past. So the idea is that you always have the optimal path via the global cloud or via the best possible backbone. SASE is there also to ensure that we can control actually where the traffic is going with tightly integrated services that are present at the SASE controllers and gateways that are present and in all the different points of presence around the world. Identity needs to be context aware. So SASE's key distinction is that you're no longer define IP addresses and network segments to access other IP addresses, ports, and network segments, but you actually build a context-aware policy around the users or sites or device's identity fingerprint, and apply context-aware policies. Context-aware means to know where are the different, where is this IP addressing from? Is that IP addressing from a group, or is the identity coming from a group that is allowed to access a certain application outside from a specific region, for instance? And of course, it needs to come as a service. So it needs to be always present and highly integrated with all these functionalities. So let's drill down in the multi-endpoint support. As mentioned, these can be all types of edges. We can also distinguish between managed and unmanaged devices. This means that for laptops and tablets that are managed and are corporate devices, you may deploy an agent, but you also want to support unmanaged edges like partners or even your PC or laptop or Mac at home, which are then should be able to access the enterprise resources agentless, so either via browser-based access or by other means. And of course, we still have to have all the connectivity options present. So if you say we just put one big link in one site to access all the applications, you still need SD-WAN and path selection and application awareness and quality of service to ensure more than ever that your sites are available. Also very important is the global cloud SASE footprint. So there are different approaches in this. There are some offerings that have built their own infrastructures and POPs in order to be in control of the full stack. We see that with the SASE ability to put them into cloud and cloud native POPs moves the edge much closer to the endpoints, and then by thus minimizing also the latency. So it's super important that the SASE instances are close to where your business is. So for instance, if you're an Azure, you have an Azure strategy to migrate all your workloads to Azure, you should have SASE deployments in Azure in order to have the best possible accessibility and performance and security for your end users. At the same time, it's super important that it should not be locked into one cloud provider. So the SASE platform and the network design needs to be multi-cloud ready. And also a big differentiator, also when you look at SASE, different SASE solutions, is the SASE solution able to enforce also network zoning, threat detection and prevention also at the edge. So look at also hybrid cloud offerings, and coming back to the reality, these 70% of enterprises are using predominantly a hybrid cloud strategy. So we will always have on-prem and cloud-only installations. And the good thing is that intelligent solutions here that deploy a secure intelligent edge will actually pair up with the cloud SASE components to dynamically scale, but also unifiedly for security policies at the edge, but also in cloud. So let's look at two SASE options. So one is a light branch that only is focusing on SD-WAN, WAN optimization, and firewalling, which directly talks with heavy cloud instances that are then offloading the branch and all the traffic and are doing then the heavy lifting and the scaling on the traffic for all the in-depth security, but also threat detection measures, including but also the policy enforcement for access policies and so on. But also the other way around, you can have heavy branches that still will require a lot of a full branch deployment because the cloud might not be as close, and for other use case reasons should not be like regulatory ones should not be used at all. In some cases, we see we get asked, will the branch be go away? We actually will think this is likely the case for very, very small sites, point of sales, where you have direct connectors. I think in the end, it's the question of how much you can support in IT, and do you want to support in IT in the future with the different site footprints? So we think that there will be a good portion of sites that will not have like dedicated SASE or SD-WAN related hardware, but will just point to the next to the cloud POPs to ensure that access to the applications and the security is available as best with the best standards. And I think it's also important to look at the cloud service backbone and quality here. So you have to ask yourself, how robust are your services in clouds? How elastic are offerings in that space? Does the solution I'm looking at leverage cloud native practices? Also, what is the number of peerings, the diversity of peerings? What is the multi-cloud support? Is this solution only working with a subset of my cloud providers? And do I have to still keep another like cloud connectivity option running or not? And last but not least, how good is the end-to-end latency and what is my visibility? There are a lot of options out there that will just provide you one half of the equation. So saying connect everything that you have to my cloud POPs and you will have to deal with the rest. I think what we've seen, especially in, for mission critical applications, enterprises usually want to have an end-to-end latency guarantees and also visibility and the possibility to actually steer where the traffic is going to. Another aspect is the tight integration, because you don't want to actually again, end up in the same sprawl of point products and appliances as I mentioned initially. So don't go back there. And a tight integration yields a lot of benefits. So it's minimizing latency. You have optimal performance. It's a single pass engine. So this means once a packet is decrypted, it runs through all the checks, through all the service functions. It's then re-encrypted to the destination with maximum performance. So no chaining, no service chaining that where you introduce complexity and more moving parts. And of course, a unified management across all this is only possible if you have an integrated solution. To sum this up in the and also come to the two last aspects, identity and as a service. Identity in context aware. What does this mean in this context? This context means that we can actually directly define policies for everything that's connecting to your applications and based on the context. So I'll give you an example. So we can make a big difference what the user Amy can do from her corporate laptop versus what the user Amy can do when she's using her personal phone. This could be a difference between read and write access for the corporate device and on a read-only access if the user Amy comes from a personal device or personal phone or PC to when they access company critical applications or even down to an data level when it comes to confidentially tagged information. So it's always a combination of visibility and enforcement, and it's important to emphasize here that it's not only about the real-time data or inline protection, but also out of bounds API inspection, which is also a part of the CASB functionality of the SASE function. So what does this as a service aspect of SASE means from a operations perspective is it's what is clear and what is also has crystallized over the years is that the do-it-yourself approach is still a valid approach for certain enterprises that have the budget and which is their which where the network and is part of their core business. But what we've seen over the past years is that there was always this do-it-yourself or this fully managed approach. And when you look at fully managed SASE providers, make sure that there are no point products that are just stitched together and integrated loosely via certain tools. I think this is an essential differentiator also in what the outcome is then from a performance and speed perspective. And we can also say that the co-managed approach is now the kind of the approach that is becoming the new kind of best practice, where you have a very knowledgeable service provider with a platform which is working together with a highly efficient team that will globally architect, design, but also steer the application, the network, and the security policies and architecture for the organization. With that, I would like to thank you again for taking the time and listening in here to the EcoCast live event. I'm now open for Q&A if you have any further questions. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, great presentation, Moritz. We do have some questions for you here from the audience. We've got just a few minutes. So let's see. First one that came in, they're asking, essentially, is this hardware or software?
The good question. Thank you. So it's both. So so SASE means, I mean, there are different ways on how these new network architectures and innovations are implemented, but I think that for an end-to-end solution, there's a tight integration between a hardware that runs on site. It's usually a universal CPE that can deliver the functions that you need. That is then directly connected, integrated in the SASE policy engine and framework and backbone. But it also includes software. If you think of the managed endpoints where you deploy agents to actually connect to the SASE controllers and backbones for zero trust access. But it also comes without hardware or without software. If you think of the just browser-based access, so there's actually no hardware, no software extra to be installed. You just use your browser to access your company's applications or access the internet.
Got it. Got it. Okay. And then what's the trigger point that causes people to say, we've just got to put this in?
Yeah, I think what we've seen and what also research shows and surveys show is that that enterprises are looking for a much more agile architecture and network and security approach that simplifies the number of moving parts and increases their flexibility to a great extent. We usually see this when we look at our customers coming from an MPLS background, but also customers that just see that their current technology landscape is just it's just gotten too complex and hard to operate, or they just simply face an end of life situation where they have to renew maintenance or actually completely switch out a hardware and software stack because the vendor announced an end of life. And with a SASE as a service solution, you don't have those problems.
Okay. Okay. Very nice. And I mean, what should people do to get started? If this resonated with them, they think this can help, what's the next step?
A good next step is to do an assessment. Of course, speak to our consultants and cloud architects to get a quick feedback on where they are in kind of maturity terms and where we could help them with immediate outcomes. It highly depends on where your pain points are. But I think what SASE has proven in the past and what we see is that the time to value is actually it's in a few hours to a few days versus months and years for migrations.
Very nice, very nice. Well, Moritz, I'm afraid that's all the time we have, but it's been really great having you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, great presentation there from Open Systems. I brought up a poll question on the screen that says, what additional information would you like about the Open Systems solution? I encourage everyone to answer that question if possible. We do appreciate it, as does Open Systems. So I learned some really interesting things there from the Open Systems presentation. One of them was hot potato versus cold potato routing. Did anybody catch that? That was a very interesting and new concept to me. You can actually Google that, cold potato routing. Another one was this concept of SASE, S-A-S-E, which is kind of fun to say, SASE. And SASE really provides edge locations with direct internet access without having the latency of having to go through a central headquarters like you would traditionally do with an MPLS or a WAN network. All right, thank you everyone who answered that poll question. We do appreciate it. And now it's time to move on to our next presentation. I'm excited now to introduce Mr. Bassam Khan, Vice President of Product and Technical Marketing at Gigamon. Bassam, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Thank you for being on. Take it away.
Okay, excellent. Hello, everybody. My name is Bassam Khan. I look after product and technical marketing here at Gigamon. I'm going to jump straight into the topic. We have some really interesting information for you. I'm going to actually give you a quick background on this first. This presentation, when we created it, was about digital transformation, which means the need to stay agile, the need to stay secure, as well as optimize tools and so on, and why that's necessary for digital transformation. The world's kind of changed in the past couple of weeks in many ways, in short term and longer term. So I pretty much went through and replaced digital transformation for what's happening right now, which is really this working from home situation, which is putting a lot of stress on our networks and our networking teams and so on. So I'm going to shift the topic around a little bit to talk about that. And the interesting thing that I went through when I was going through this exercise was a lot of the things that were required and necessary for digital transformation are also things that are necessary for what we're going through right now. It's really about staying nimble and being able to secure in an attack surface that's changing constantly. What is NetOps 2.0? I'm going to start off with this notion of what's next in networking. And the way we describe it is very much in line with how Gartner describes NetOps 2.0, which has to do with the notion of continuous next. So its ability to be able to move quickly in the world of networking as the network world changes. So the way Gartner describes is typically networking moves at a appliance speed when the world is moving at much more around a software speed. They've put out a paper out there. I believe we do have copies if you want to reach out to us that we can share, that we've gotten the rights from Gartner to do so. But it's a notion of having the ability to specific instructions on how to move faster in networking. It has to do with three different things. One is around network visibility. Second one is around automation. So this is really around tying in multiple chains of tools using Ansible, using Puppet Chef, whatever, but having playbooks that define what the actions look like. And my next click on the slide should hopefully see all information in motion. So what we're going to be covering is off these three different topics in this particular discussion. We're going to cover the first one. And from our perspective, there's three aspects to network visibility that's really key. One is having a single place that provides visibility into all data in motion. The second thing is the ability to manage applications, because guess what? right now with what's going on, it's a little bit less about the network, it's about the application. I was on the phone with our CIO yesterday, and he was saying, Bassam, right now, the only thing that matters to me are applications and access to the data. Nobody cares what I'm doing in networking, but it really is, those are the two big things that you guys care about. And that's very, very true. And the third one's around streamlining tools, which is very, very important as the economic climate starts to change going forward. As I mentioned, the world's changed, and we really don't know what's coming in the coming months, honestly. But there's some things that we can kind of start to see happening, some patterns that's starting to take place. Number one, increase in remote working. We're doing that at Gigamon right now. Everyone's required to work remotely. And I'm in California. I'm in San Francisco Bay Area. And we have a stay in place measure in place right now. So I'm working from home. For this particular call, I'm not needing to dial in and having to go through my Cisco Connect, Anywhere Connect, WAN app, LAN Connect application. So I'm not VPNing in right now. But there are a lot of organizations that need to VPN in. So all of a sudden you go from what we call inside out. So you go from, outside in rather. So you go from having traffic, most of your traffic be inside the corporation, to moving outside. So this is a significant trend that's happening really, really fast, and there's lots of changes. So what Jack, our CIO, was telling me was, Bassam, one of the ways I use Gigamon right now, visibility capability, is to know all these changes I'm making, is it really working? Are my apps running well? Are my tools able to still get the right data to make sure apps are working well? So with all this fast changes, lots of changes going on, from an attack perspective, that increases the surface, the attack surface basically that attackers can come in. Because of all of these changes taking place, it adds to complexity, and complexity leads to more vulnerability. And I mentioned economic uncertainty. So right now, again, our CIO does not care much about budgets right now because he's just running around. But what is certain is there will be uncertainty in terms of budgets and the economy in general. And so this is becoming something of concern. So this is where we talk about, hopefully my next clicks come through, and how we address that is through through a visibility fabric. So right now, what you hopefully will be seeing is increasing complex infrastructure. This is what the typical IT infrastructure looks like. I've got the networking at the core and lots of tools hanging off the networking trying to access its own data. In order for it to do its security function, in order for it to do its performance monitoring, network performance monitoring, all the different functions that tools do. The challenge is that every tool needs to jump into every single data point in order to see what's going on. What Gigamon and this notion of visibility actually helps people do is provides a single place where the data has been tapped one time, and all of the tools are able to access the data in one place. So I mentioned all this shift happening in IT right now. We're moving security tools around, increasing our VPN bandwidth and capacity and so on. Are we doing the right thing? When I make this move, did I break something else in the process? So by having all of the data in one single place, all of the tools are able to see exactly what's going on. So this is why it's a very, very critical process to have all of this data in one place. So what does this visibility fabric do? And this is really, really important step because it provides one place for tools to come in, but as soon as you aggregate the data, which is what I mentioned, there's a lot of additional capabilities that people have or that these platforms are able to perform on behalf of the tools. So the tools, for example, are not needing to decrypt the data every single time. Decryption is very CPU and resource intensive. So rather than decrypting at a tools level, these platforms tend to decrypt once and send the right data to the right tool. Some of the data might be fully decrypted, clear text traffic going out to some of the tools. Other tools might not need to see all the data. They may only need to see maybe some parts of the data. Or if it's a healthcare kind of a situation, you might want to protect the EHS records, and the personally identifiable information, and mask out patients' names and health records and certain aspects, but still get the rest of the data. There was this document. So if you look at the resources file here, and I'll also touch on this at the end of the presentation, there was an advisory that the NSA put out, I believe, end of November of this past year. They talk about how to do decryption, and first of all, the reasons for decrypting traffic because of all the malware activities that's now happening in an encrypted mode. So you must decrypt is their recommendation. And once you decrypt, you have to be careful because as soon as you open up the box, there's a lot of material in there that becomes sensitive, and they talk about ways of handling that decrypted data. So this is coming from the NSA, so they've obviously put a lot of time into this, time and research and experience into this. So once the data is decrypted, there's a number of transformations that can happen. So the simplest transformation is deduplication. So when we go into an organization, a new customer for Gigamon, we typically see about 53% of the data packets being duplicate. Why are there so many duplicates? Because of typical network infrastructure is not super clean. You've got repetitive data flowing to different tools and different parts of the network and the subnets and so on. So we typically see 53%. So by deduplicating this 53%, we instantly, or when I say we, I mean this breed of technology, instantly doubles the capacity of all the tools just by deduplication alone. But on top of that, there's additional functionality that tends to take place around intelligence. So it could be things like pulling out additional like NetFlow type of information, all the way up to application intelligence, which is what I'll really be covering right now. So application intelligence is needed nowadays because of the way networking has changed. So if you look at organizations, there are almost, on the average, almost 1,000 applications, but internally built. But there's also lots and lots more external applications that organizations are running. So I forget what the number was. I actually did look at this a little while ago. The number of applications running in any organization, it was massive. So the question is, why are we treating all the applications same when it comes to feeding them into the tool? Some applications may be of more interest, like Bassam going out to Dropbox or BitTorrent or something. Some applications might be less interesting, like Bassam watching a Netflix video, hopefully not too much at work, but you guys know that does happen. So blocking those by protocol, it doesn't really make sense because a lot of these just happen over HTTP or TPS protocols. So if you just block out an entire protocol to reduce the traffic to the tools or send those to certain tools, it may or may not. Most likely, it's not going to be the most efficient way. And then there's containers. So nowadays, when you look at digital applications, and Moritz spoke about this before about the digital transformation, these digital applications are not just 3-tiered application that's really easy to monitor and secure. They're 10-tier, 15, 20 different tiers that are running all over the place, some on our supplier's system, some are back to our Oracle database on premises, and some running in containers. So this notion of visibility around containers and understanding how the applications are all pieces are coming together to form an application become very, very important. So I'm going to go forward here. It's going to do the entire build. So this is Gigamon's screen, and I'm not going to talk too much about this, but the reason I'm pulling this up is to provide you a notion of doing system network management and visibility management using applications versus network packets itself. So in our particular screen, and other systems have this as well, their screens may look a little bit different, but instantly you'll start to see the top 10 applications that's being used right now. So top 10 could be defined by flow. It could be defined by packets. It could be scoped by the time frame. So instantly people know what the applications are. And we call it application visualization intelligence. And just knowing this is super important. Now, there are some tools, like some of the next-gen firewalls, that will identify application at the edge, at the firewall level. But what's coming inside and what's being brokered over to the tools isn't being discriminated or whatever, filtered based on applications. And even just the fact that people see applications is very helpful. So I'm not going to obviously disclose the name, but there's a federal agency, U.S. government agency that has Gigamon, and our salesperson or sales engineer went in and was talking about application intelligence, and he turned on App Intel. He had, or the NetOps person right there turned on App Intel in our product, which they hadn't seen before. And the person was, very impressed, like, wow, I see all the applications, but wait, something's wrong here because you've got BitTorrent, and we don't have BitTorrent. We're very secure here. And then the two of them looked into it. Turns out they had BitTorrent. So the NetOps person grabbed our sales engineer, grabbed his laptop, walked him over inside the SOC, and said, guys, we've got BitTorrent running in our network. And I'm not going to repeat the words they said, but there's they said basically it's impossible. That's not possible. They looked into it, and sure enough, there was some person figured out a way to run BitTorrent in this government agency. That's one of the many, many different use cases. If you look at the right of the side of the screen, there's a lot more applications, and one of the other use cases is the ability to pick a set of applications or family of applications. So you can say, I want to take YouTube traffic and Facebook traffic and send it to fewer tools by just clicking those two check boxes. Click on operations, and then choosing where you send those traffic or where you don't send those traffic. So it could be done at a specific application level. It can also be done at a family of application levels. It's called streaming media. One thing that's very relevant in this climate is we also have a group called streaming audio-video conferencing, or something to that extent, which includes Zoom, which includes WebEx, which includes GoToWebinar, and a few other of these conferencing applications. So, with this increase in conferencing applications, you probably will not be needing as much information as we've needed in the past to send to all the tools. So the tools should not be overwhelmed with traffic. That's not as important. It may be important to some security tools, but not to all of the different tools that are out there. So this next slide, basically we talk about there's application intelligence that identifies applications. There's also application metadata. That's a layer 7 type of information that talks about not only did Bassam say, run this application, but the database part of that application requested this SQL query. So this notion of app metadata will show you what the SQL query looks like, and then it will show you how long it took to do the query. And there's a number of use cases that, especially on the security side, that's used to identify anomalous behavior based on that additional visibility that people get. So again, this comes down to managing your network and securing your network, not based on specific packets, but based on applications and the behaviors of those applications. So that's a security use case. The third one, so we talked about running fast, being able to deploy tools quickly and such with the visibility fabric. Then we talked about the security use case for App Intel with metadata and filtering as well. And the third one is a little bit more on the filtering, which is optimizing. So as I mentioned, we need to be very, very cost conscious, budget conscious, especially going forward. Once this work from home environment clears, it's going to be an interesting situation that we're in. But one thing that is certain is the fact that our economic forecasts and our budgets are good. There's going to be some level of uncertainty associated with that. So what that basically means is we have to get more out of the tools that we have. And one way to do that is through this application-based network management. So rather than sending all the applications to all the tools, some applications may be more scrutinized by certain tools and some not. So the alternative to doing this is sending all of the packets, all of the data to all of the tools. And, of course, you can filter based on protocols, TCP protocols, and so on. But this is a much, much more efficient way of processing that information and having the tools focus on what they're meant to be designed for, what they're meant to focus the most. So in closing, what I'd like to just repeat something I said. First of all, there's a major shift happening. We're on the midst of it right now. One of the most common things, commonality across the shift in all of our IT organizations and different companies is the fact that people are working remotely. This is causing a lot of VPN challenges, re-architecting, redeploying of tools. So that's the first thing that's happening. We believe, strongly believe, Visibility Fabric plays a key part in helping IT be able to make these changes very, very quickly, be able to see the impact of each different plugging of a cable that we're doing, re-architecting anything, redeploying anything, what's the change. And because of the complexity, there's a lot of new attack surface. You've already seen our health services being attacked. You've seen the new PDF files that give you COVID maps that are malware PDF files. So this is already taking place right now, and people are looking for weaknesses to come in. And the third one, that visibility fabric third area the visibility fabric helps with a lot is around doing more with less. So not only is it that you're filtering your traffic, but if you have an older tool, for example, that can only design for 10 gigabits per second, and you need to upgrade to 100 gigabits per second based on your new needs, these platforms, Gigamon being one of them, will help you maintain use of that 10 gigabits per second interface, that tool, to be able to run in a much, much faster networking environment. So it extends the life of your existing tools. So hopefully this was helpful, but a couple of suggestions we have for you. One is you might want to go look up the NSA advisory that's out there. It is a very informative, very prescriptive document on how to do decryption and the importance of doing decryption. We've also written a paper on digital transformation, and a lot of things that we talk about in digital transformation applies to the transformation that we're in the midst of over the past couple of weeks. That's going to go on for the next months and maybe longer. The last thing, if any of this makes sense, we would love to speak to you, talk very specifically about your environment. We said before you make any change, changes to the network, think about putting a visibility fabric in place. That advice is more important now than it's ever been before because we can help. We can help you move faster and have less effort in deploying tools, re-architecting, seeing what's going on. So with that, Dave, I will hand this over to you.
Great presentation, Bassam. I like how you made this very timely, very apropos for what's going on in the world today. So thank you for taking time to do that. While we do some Q&A for the audience, I'm just going to bring up this poll question that says, what additional information would you like about the Gigamon solution? And we'll just leave that up while we do some Q&A. So let's see, first question that came in, Sandra is asking, is the decryption being done by hardware or software, and where are the keys stored in this solution?
Right. So I can speak to our solution. So we do it by software, and the boxes that we sell, appliances for our on-premise solution, we also have cloud solution, but the on-premise solution are scoped for certain gigabits per second. It will have a little bit of a hit for gigabits per second, but we keep up with any level of traffic out there. So where are the keys being stored? The keys are being stored. We work with any other system out there. So, for example, we have integration with Encipher. We work as a man in the middle. So, using any kind of key management system you might have in place. Our solution is not a proxy system. So, again, man in the middle. So, when an endpoint talks to us, when a user says, "Hey, go to securesite.com," using your certificates and whatever certificate management tool you have, we'll interface with that. We will get the key, we'll decrypt, and we'll send an encrypted session over to the securesite.com. And again, it's a man-in-the-middle approach. It's possible to deploy it both as a out-of-band for your out-of-band tools as well as inline, and we go all the way up to TLS 1.3. So hopefully that answered your question.
Okay, very nice. It does, yeah. Another question from George. He's asking, he's saying we're already seeing VPN slow down when everyone works from home, but is the expense in upgrading worth it to fix what may be a temporary situation? What's your take on that, Bassam?
Very good question, and this hopefully is a temporary solution. Once we've made the change, we're one and done. If that's the only change that we're expecting to happen, then I would say no. It's not worth putting in an entire visibility fabric in your. Well, I take that back. If this is the only use case, is the one change that we're doing, but there's lots of other use cases and lots of other changes that's coming in the future. So, for example, do we expect to roll out a new tool? Do we expect to redeploy some of the tools back on premises for east-west and not VPN traffic? Do we expect to roll out new applications that will impact my network? Do we expect to have start doing decrypted traffic inspection? So any kind of network changes, deploying new tools. So if it's just this one use case of moving VPNs in, moving the traffic and reallocating more VPNs and moving that back in, the value of getting a visibility fabric is not that high for just that one use case. But there's a whole lot of other use cases that come up and a lot of other benefit areas that these platforms will provide to you. That's completely worth looking into. And one thing I should mention is, and this is again not a corporate pitch. Hopefully you don't take it as such, but we are deployed at, or the systems at Gigamon, to our thing, at almost all of the biggest banks, biggest Fortune 100, almost all the Fortune 100 companies, 10 out of 10 government agencies. Anytime there's any kind of complexity to a network, it is super important to simplify the complexity by building a layer between the tools and all of the network complexity, so the tools have one place to go to and not have to get their tentacles into the complex infrastructure that we have. So the use cases go well beyond just the VPN shift that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, if this made sense before increased VPN traffic, it makes even more sense now, I would guess. At least that's my take. Another question here. Esteban says that they're in the banking industry, and if they wanted to implement Gigamon, would there be major changes required?
In the banking industry, deploy Gigamon, would there be major changes required? So the short answer is it depends on how you would like to use Gigamon and how extensively you'd like to use Gigamon. So the diagram I had on earlier of having every single tool plug in to Gigamon, and if the tools are currently plugging in and fetching its own data, there is some level of interface rewiring, basically, that needs to happen. However, I'm talking about extreme case now. That happens once. So we're plugging in, our customers plug in Gigamon one time. So we usually work off of tap ports, which is much more reliable than span ports, which is what a lot of tools tend to plug into. So we tap in one time into your infrastructure. Most of our customers may start smaller. I'm going to start at HQ, and then we move out to the branch offices and start tapping there. You can have the tools working in parallel, but as soon as enough traffic comes into this visibility fabric, then you can plug in, you can have the tools point to, or have the traffic point from Gigamon over to the tools rather than having to fetch the data itself. However, once it's in place, every new tool to deployment, redeployment, re-architecture, inline or out of band happens much faster. We call it minutes, not months, and literally that is the case for many of our customers. So the short answer to your question is that it can be deployed very quickly in a limited environment, but to get a full benefit, it does require some work, but that's work that you need to do anyway.
Okay. Charles is asking if endpoints are required to install a new root certificate to enable TLS decryption.
Okay, are endpoints needing new root certificates for TLS decryption? So there's endpoints, right? So these are the users. There's a one-time certificate insertion that needs to happen. So this happens for any kind of TLS decryption process on any system in an IT organization, where a user will see a message pop up saying there's, when they're on the intranet, saying, do you trust the certificate? And usually IT sends a note to all hands saying, when you get this message, you'll see this message. When you get it, click yes, accept. And yes, the short answer is that's how TLS decryption and inspection works. And I would again point you back to the NSA document that dives into this into a little bit more detail.
Okay, excellent. And then probably last question we have time for, Anthony's asking if this can help with SOC 2 compliance.
Can we help with SOC 2 compliance? We can. So I can't speak very specific. So SOC 2 is a data center compliance, from my understanding. Gigamon provides appliances. We also do have a cloud service, and that cloud service is our threat. It's called Threat Insight. It's a network-based threat detection and response product. It helps incident responders find threats very, very quickly. It's a cloud-based product that metadata, traffic metadata gets sent to the cloud. Everything I've talked about so far is around visibility. It's not related to Threat Insight, so that product is SOC 2 compliant. Our core product, Gigamon Fabric Manager, Gigamon Visibility Fabric, that is it's an on-premises product, so there's no SOC compliance. Like I said, we're in every agency. There's a lot of compliance work we've gone through. SOC, I believe, is for data center, and that applies to this one other add-on product that we have. So hopefully that answers your question. It's an appliance that you put in your center where SOC is not relevant, and our cloud product is SOC compliant.
Okay, excellent. All right. Well, so if people want to get started with Gigamon, any recommendations, suggestions, what should people do?
Do contact us, and we'll work fast. We'll make sure that you guys are successful. We have all kinds. We make it as easy as possible for you to try Gigamon, and do get in touch with us, and we will have a conversation very specific to your environment. We've got a ton of experience in every single industry out there, going from banks to insurance companies to utilities to small, medium-sized organizations and so on. So we can speak to your terms with other people that we've helped in your space very, very specifically once if you do get in touch with us.
Excellent. All right. Well, great presentation. We got that feedback from the audience as well. They really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you so much for being on the event today, Bassam.
Thank you, Dave, and thanks everybody that attended.
And thank you to Gigamon for supporting today's Networking EcoCast. Check out the PDF that's available for download there in your Handouts tab. And, of course, also visit gigamon.com to try out the solution for yourself. And now it's time for our first Amazon $500 gift card winner. That's going to Kiki Hanley from Minnesota. Congratulations, Kiki Hanley from Minnesota. 2 more gift cards still to give away on the event today, so make sure you stay tuned. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our next presenters on today's Networking EcoCast. I'm glad to welcome Leon Adeto, Head Geek at SolarWinds, and Destiny Bertucci, Senior Product Manager at SolarWinds. Leon, Destiny, are you there?
I am. We are.
Awesome. Thanks for being on. Take it away.
No problem. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for carving some time out of your day to join us. There's been a lot of amazing conversations so far about different levels of security. What Destiny and I want to talk about is easy and effective security solutions. You know, a lot of us say that security is everyone's job, and what we want to do is talk about ways that you can make that happen regardless of what your job title is. First, some introductions. Destiny, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Destiny Bertucci, and when I first started, I was an IT kind of network enthusiast that dove into databases, and then I pretty much decided to take over the security greatness. So I've had the pleasure of being with SolarWinds for 14 years, and I absolutely love being one of the product heads for Network Configuration Manager. Up next, Leon.
Okay, so my name again is Leon Adeto. I'm a head geek at SolarWinds. Yes, that's actually my job title. I've been in IT for about 30 years. I've spent 20 of those years focused on monitoring using a variety of tools, including SolarWinds since 2003, and a member of the SWAC forum, a 150,000 member community that supports folks in all sorts of ways in their IT career. You can find Destiny and I on SWAC. My ID is AdatoLE, and you can also find me on the Twitters, as the young kids say, at Leon Adeto, and find out more about what we have to say. So we want to dive right into it. What we're going to talk about, like I said, is the state of security, what you're facing today, also the state of security jobs. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that there aren't enough hands to do the work that there is, so we'll talk about ways to close the staffing gap. And related to that is, if you don't have the authority, how visibility helps you bridge that gap along the way. So diving in, Destiny, security is your game. So what is it like out there right now?
So it's not really a new thing, but one of the things that we want to talk about is your biggest threat is usually your insiders. And a lot of the times it's negligence, and it's not even something that's being, meant to do, right? Like it's your privileged users that we just let kind of run amok. So, but you're starting to see a shift now towards things like, different password vaults of which that are available out there. And if you don't have one, I would highly suggest it, and I hope that your corporations are doing that as well. When we talk about cybersecurity maturity needs attention, that has to kind of revolve around. We have to start doing audits. We have to be compliant. We have to start looking at the bigger picture. And being compliant does not mean that you're secure, but also being secure does not mean that you're compliant. So a healthy dose of understanding of compliance and how that helps you with your security audits so that it can actually help you be more secure in your future. We know that the sales around it are $125 billion today. And with a predicted growth of 40%, this is crazy when you start to think about $1,000 an employee that's coming across here. But in all actuality, what we need to do is have a healthy dose of actual paranoia, right? Like a lot of people are like, when they look at cybersecurity, right?
Be afraid.
When everybody looks at it, yeah. Because when most people look at this, they want to get kind of in a box, right? And they're like, I need to secure all the things. I need to do everything. I need to make sure that everything is just tightened. And in actuality, when you do that, you create a backdoor, right? Because people are just wanting to do their job. And if you're not working with them and having those conversations, right? Like, how do you do your daily usage? How can we make that more secure? If you're not adjusting your security policies based around what work they're providing on at least a yearly basis, then you may be creating a backdoor where they're going to be trying to find ways around your security, which if you don't know the ways around it, right, like then you're not able to actually plug those holes. So I'd say that, like, when we're looking at security breaches, a lot of the times it's by accident. It's people who are downloading things that maybe they shouldn't have and their computer got stolen and we don't have encryption on their actual laptop or things of that nature. Like they have passwords that they're getting. People are social engineering. They're doing things on this backside. But as the healthy paranoia that me and Leon like to talk about is visibility, right? And we've heard about the visibility fabrics and gaps of which that you can have. And what me and Leon always try to tell everybody is if you don't have an environment that you're monitoring the entities from your full stack, right? Like then you're not actually having that visibility to see an anomaly. And if you have a breach or you have something that's happening to you actively or prior and you didn't have monitoring in place, then unfortunately you don't have a baseline for normal, right? And when you don't have a baseline for normal, you don't see those ticks of an anomaly. You don't see the interaction. You don't see I always laugh when we're in public because I always tell them, like, I want to breathe, right? Like I want to feel the environment as if it's a human body and I have health statistics. That way I can see if the fever comes up, the fast heartbeat, something that's coming across there. And to accomplish that goal, you have to be able to be monitoring those entities. So the state of security it's always going to be in your face. It's constantly increasing in money. And I guarantee you it's never going to lack, right? Like we're not in a situation of awareness with everything being digital to where these numbers are going to be dropping significantly because we're only going to be expected to be more secure and providing a secure environment that consumers as well as employees are actually working with and integrating with.
Yep. Okay, so as I said before, there's not enough hands to do the job, but by how much? So back in 2018, back in the good old days, New York Times said that we're going to be short by about 3.5 million InfoSec jobs in 2021. Well, fast forward, just look at that last bullet point. Right now here in 2020, we know the shortage is already at 4.07 million. So there's a lot of work that's going undone or having to be covered by people who don't have InfoSec in their job title. So that leads us to a very important question, which is how do I fill the gap? What can I do? And I think that there's a few ideas that are fairly obvious. I mean, there's training, right? You go out, get some InfoSec training. But Destiny, we were talking earlier, and you said there's InfoSec training happening in a lot of other places, like where?
So a lot of the training that you're seeing happening is at any level of certifications right now. So as I like to say, it's like insurance, right? Like you have to have insurance in America for your cars, right? Whether you like it or not, you have to. It's just your legal obligation. That's the same thing with security. So the way that the IT force is actually trying to counteract that is, since there's not a lot of security professionals like myself with the degrees and certification that are available for the public sector, what they're doing is they're implementing it at all levels of your actual, certification. So if you're getting an ACE exam now, you're going to be discussing security and how to actually do that. If you're getting a virtualization, you're going to be discussing security and you're going to be having that. If you're in Cisco, you not only have a new track for SIOPs, but you also have a track within your networking or even designed for based upon security. So to address the market need for a vast majority of people to be security, it's not that it's your security person's obligation and duty. No, it's everyone's now, right? Like, so it's everybody's burden to bear. It's everyone's understanding to have, which means if you're hiring new people that are coming straight out of degree programs or certifications, you're getting a layer of security essentially.
Right. So yeah, and the point there is that if you're having trouble filling that gap, you might want to look in other areas of your organization for who might have either the initial training that you need that you didn't expect. Again, you've got a network, an entry-level network engineer with a CCNA. They've had some security exposure. Same thing with somebody with just with an A+ or what have you. You may also want to look completely elsewhere. Look at somebody who's in accounting who just is interested in that stuff, because in addition to training, there's also mentoring. Now, mentoring does not mean teaching the skills. Mentoring means instilling the enthusiasm and the understanding about it. And if you find that this topic resonates with other employees in your organization, those may be really good candidates because they're going to see the company in a completely different way that is valuable to you as well. But the other thing that helps is tools, and that's where monitoring comes in. The idea that tools have the opportunity to make you smarter than you normally are, or to make your staff smarter because they're going to make you more aware. You may not know exactly how to fix something, but you will know that something is wrong and begin to work on it. And that is actually where we want to go now, is into a demo. So give me a second here. And
while you're getting that brought up, mainly on the tools is that visibility, right? It's like if you're able to see your environment from the full stack and all the layers, you're able to have those conversations of how do we make sure that this is normal? How do we put proactive alarms in place? How are we able to report on this? How are we able to do those functions so that we're able to be more secure just by awareness?
Right. Okay, so give me a second here. I want to be able to share that screen.
Yay, now we're getting a screen share happening.
There we go. Okay, so you may have to click into the screen share depending on how you have your Windows set up. Destiny, you're going to let me know when you can see our first demo.
I can.
Okay, fantastic. So there's a lot of tools that will help you. I think a lot of them will come to mind very naturally. Antivirus. Destiny, you mentioned password managers. That's one that's low-hanging fruit. Every organization should have one and should make it available to their employees all over. Access rights auditing, automation, and automating inventory and things like that. But some of the stuff really falls under the heading of basic blocking and tackling. For example, patching. Patching, I think, has become seen as so unsexy and so sort of run-of-the-mill that it's fallen by the wayside. So here is a patching system, doesn't matter which one. And what I can see from here is, first of all, I have some critical problems with Microsoft patches, with my Windows patches. And here I've got 5,341 more items to go. That may be something you want to work on, but what this tells you is that there is a lot of things that haven't gotten a patch for a particular reason. Now, maybe you have a reason. Destiny, you were talking about audit and compliance and security. Maybe you have devices that can't be upgraded. They can't be patched. That's fine. You have a reason. But the most important thing is that you know what you have out there, what version it's at, and why it's at the version it's at, so that when that exception has gone away, you can quickly bring things up to spec. Another example here on the Google tab is important updates, but those are Chrome updates. Now, again, once upon a time, we thought, oh, yeah, fine, browser update, big deal. No. Almost everything is running through the browser now. You want to make sure that that is up to date. And of course, if you look down here at the bottom, I can tell exactly which devices are missing a particular patch. Here I've got 4 machines that are missing some .NET patches. Okay, fine. But again, when the exception has gone away or it just got missed, I can jump right into it. So that's the first area that I think helps everybody do security. Another one is configuration management. It's another simple thing that people overlook for the power. So Destiny, why don't you talk us through some of these screens?
Yeah, so this is part of our compliance in the Network Configuration Manager. And what this does is it simplifies your network compliance. And what we do is we use the automated network configuration tools to deploy standardized config. We can detect out of the process changes, audit configurations, and even correct violations. As you can see here, if you wanted to click on one of those, There you go. So that you can actually see, you can auto remediate from the time that you open the actual report, or execute it on one node or to all nodes that are in violation. And then also, this not only allows you insight and visibility, but it also helps your reporting capabilities for audits, or something that's coming out heavily is your security scorecards. So if you're able to provide this, then you're able to actually show, and then they can rank you based upon a scorecard of are you meeting a compliance or not, which could actually cost or give you more contracts. So if we want to talk about in the same way for like end of sales, end of life, we can look at another area in the Network Configuration Manager that allows you to inventory the devices of which that you have. And when this inventory allows you to report and allows you to be able to know what devices are connected to your network, as well as their hardware and software configurations. And when they approach their end of service or end of life, then you're able to have this tool here that you can actually report on and make you aware, not only through alerting, but through a report that you can actually give and say, hey, we need to look at this ahead of time proactively before we get in a situation of no upgrades if there is a breach. Right. So if we want to talk about more things that have to do with like breaches is vulnerabilities. So one of the powerful things about the Network Configuration Manager is it's kind of a beast of a product, as you can see just from here. These are just a few things of which that Network Configuration Manager can give you. But we can print out an actual vulnerability that helps you to protect your network from malware. So Network Configuration Manager takes the hassle out of the vulnerability detection because we're using NCM's integration with the National Vulnerability Database. And we give you access to the most current CVEs that identify vulnerabilities within your devices. So by doing this, not only are we showing you how that actual iOS is in jeopardy per se with the vulnerability, we can also use the firmware upgrade portion of the Network Configuration Manager and roll out mass vulnerability changes for firmware upgrades. So if you have a problem that's coming across there and say it's something that's huge, it's putting your network at chance, and we're just frustrated, we can run this report, we can give it to upper management to show them why we have to get us an emergency change request. Then we could go into the firmware upgrade tool part of the Network Configuration Manager and roll out a new firmware so that we are able to be compliant, as well as not vulnerable.
Right, and that's not just for our network gear, although we're looking at the network gear here, it's also for servers. Here we've got a server configuration manager, which gives you very much the same kind of concept. I can tell when something has changed, those little medals here that show up, and if I wanted to look at what drivers have changed recently, I can tell that some of the drivers have been updated and have been removed. There's the newer configuration on the right, the old configuration on the left, and I can tell that something happened over here. Now again, in this case, not a big deal, but if you don't know, back to Destiny's point, if you don't know what happened, you can't protect yourself against something that you didn't mean to have happen. And that takes me to the sort of the last point here, which is that visibility. I always say that in order to be effective as an IT professional, you need to have three things. You need to have responsibility, which you typically get when you walk into the building, accountability, which you get when we pass within 3 feet of a device typically, but also authority, the ability to change it. But a lot of times we don't get that because we're not in the right department or it's not our gear. So the fourth thing you can have is visibility, the ability to look at information and to be able to combine it in different ways. And that's what we're looking at here with the ability. Now here I'm looking at CPU load across a couple of different devices, also memory to get a sense. But if I'm missing a piece of gear, I'm wondering, well, there was this moment right here where something happened. I wonder, I can actually add more devices or I can add more elements, whether it's applications. So we're going to add the West array. We're just going to do a search for it. There it is. I'm going to add it in. And I realize it's a demo, so I kind of know where I'm going here, but I want to add in the configuration, back to that configuration manager. So let me just do that. And I'm going to compare it to what I already have here. And what I can see is that there was a whole block of configuration changes around this time period, and it correlates with this spike or this moment in my network. Now, maybe it's bad, maybe it's good, maybe it's related, but the fact is the ability to see what's going on and to compare all that information is the real power of having visibility into your environment.
And this is something that I would really like to call out, because with the coronavirus, obviously that's coming around here, we've actually put this out to our Slack community and asked them to show us some of our dashboards. And a lot of people are using their mission critical interfaces, their streamlines, their access from West Coast to East Coast, and they're setting up troubleshooting dashboards like this so that they can actually monitor in real time and be able to take this and report upon it to the upper management to say, hey, we're doing fine. Or, hey, here's an anomaly that we're seeing. It's under investigation, but guess what? We knew about it. We're on it, and we already have the visibility into this whole entities. And that's something that I think is very valuable with PerStack, because it doesn't see different silos. So anything that you are actually monitoring, you are able to throw up on a screen as easily as you just seen Leon, which gives you that full stack visibility that I think a lot of folks are missing. And as this coronavirus and people working from home and things that are happening in real world right now, they are finding a huge significant value in this from a security level all the way down to even upper management of proving that there's activity and people are working correctly from home. There's not a hiccup, there's not something, they're able to visually track it as well as have a reportable feature available for this. So I just wanted to make sure, because it looks so simple and it's easy for us to look at this and be like, oh yeah, you just do this. But if you are new to PerStack, that's the true value of this, is any entity that you are monitoring, you can throw up here easily, different devices, different, entities of which you're pulling, CPU, anything, and throw them on here quickly so that you can have it.
Right, because at the end of the day, the idea of security is really interlocked with performance and capacity and knowing that things are going well. That's half of it. And like you said, you have to be able to build a baseline of what normal is in order to know when things are abnormal. If you can't say it's all bad if you didn't know what good looked like before. So that's
exactly.
everything. I'm going to end the screen share, and we're going to go back. If people have questions, we're happy to answer them. I do want to say that if you have more questions, two places you definitely want to go. First of all, SolarWinds.com, obviously, but also Slack.com. As I mentioned earlier, it's our user community, 150,000 members who are helping each other out with everything from I haven't done an ACL in a long time, or I'm looking at particular brands of gear. What are your thoughts? All the way to how do I configure this report or alert, or how do I set things up? So thank you so much. Dave, if there are any questions, let us know.
Absolutely, yeah. Leon, Dustin, great presentation. In fact, we got a number of comments from the audience saying the same thing. Great demo, a very timely presentation. So thank you for that. Let's see, we'll do some Q&A. I'm just going to bring up this poll question that says, what additional information would you like about the SolarWinds solution? That's on the screen. We'll leave that up for everyone to answer while we do some Q&A. So let's see, first question that came in, they're asking if SolarWinds can monitor Linux workstations. Is that possible?
Absolutely. We can monitor just about anything up to and including the internet-connected coffee pot. Anything that has an IP address, we can monitor at some level, not a problem. And we can also collect a wide variety of statistics from it.
Very nice, very nice. Another question, does that patch software run standalone, or does it need any other modules to work?
So it'll run as a standalone module from SolarWinds, but it does build itself on top of WSUS, which is free. So you do have to have a WSUS server in place, and it just rides on top of it. And it does patching for any software out there. WSUS is limited to only doing Microsoft patches. With SolarWinds Patch Manager, you can patch, as you saw on the screen, 7-zip, Notepad++, whatever it is.
Which is usually what people are curious about, because all your third-party software updates, it allows you to shuffle through.
Yep.
Excellent. Yeah, that's very cool. Another question, how often does the network configuration tool update the list of vulnerabilities?
Every night.
Okay.
You can also adjust that. It's a schedule, but you can also adjust that within your settings if you wanted it to do weekly, but every night at 2:15 a.m. is the standard default out of the box.
Okay, perfect. Another question, do I need a Cisco account to show the end-of-life information for my equipment?
No. You do not. We actually get that from their national database that they have posted on their end of service, end of life, and it does not correlate. You do not have to have it to do that.
Okay. Does the server configuration tool work on Linux? We talked about that, right?
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Which types of data can you show in the graphing tool that you showed?
anything that you are collecting, yeah. So anything you're collecting, if you are collecting configuration information or net flow data or everything from simple CPU or hardware metrics all together, and it's all time synchronized. So you can start to look at the dependencies between a fan failure and a website, impact to your customer website.
Also, people use that for change requests. So they will set up a change request to be put on there for configuration changes, and they will put all their CPU memory interfaces and data points from NetFlow in a troubleshooting. Once they upgrade or make a configuration change, they can actually see and reflect and report upon that in their change request of either successful or gives them a hard copy of a reason to revert. So instead of saying, oh, we had to revert just for nothing, it's actual data that shows before and after of what was accomplished or not accomplished so that you can reference that back.
Yep.
Very nice. Very nice. So if somebody want to give this a try or try out all the SolarWinds solutions for themselves, is there a demo or what do you recommend?
So first thing is that demo.solarwinds.com is exactly what we were showing today. Anyone can jump on there at any time and see most of our products all integrated together. You can also download just about everything we have for a free 30-day demo. It's unlimited. That means you can load it up on a VM and throw as many devices or metrics or whatever added as you want to for those 30 days. And try it out. So you have both of those options available to you. It's also a lot of our products, most of our products are available on the Amazon store, the Amazon Marketplace and the AWS store. So you can actually just do, 2-click install into your cloud instance and take a look at it from there.
Very nice. Well, yeah, some more good feedback coming in. Michael says, really love the SolarWinds offerings. You'll have some great software. Estevan says, I'm already a customer, but I haven't had time to fully work with it, and I love the presentation. So lots of great feedback coming in. Leon, Destiny, thank you so much for being on the event today.
Thank you guys for having us.
I appreciate your time.
For more information, as Leon said, visit the SolarWinds demo site, try out these solutions for yourself. Also check out the PDF handout. It's available there in your audience console. And with that, it's time for another Amazon $500 gift card announcement. Let's see here. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Jack Bluebird from Texas. Congratulations, Jack Bluebird from Texas. One more gift card to give away after our next presentation, so make sure you stay tuned for that. All right, and now I'm excited to introduce our next presenter on today's Networking EcoCast. That is Dennis Vilfort, Director of Business Development for Composable Fabric at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Dennis, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to join. And we had some technical challenges, but we found out that the best way to proceed is for me to share my screen, so let me do that right now. So 2 seconds while I click into that. And you should be able to see my screen here in a nanosecond, and I have a presentation here that I am going to give you. So if you can see my screen, that's all I need you to say yes, and that'll be great. Can you see it says Innovation in Server Fabrics?
Yes, sir. Looks good.
Brilliant. Okay, guys. So obviously, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, we're a premier server company, and actually yesterday IDC came out and said we're actually the leading server company on the planet. So we appreciate that leadership position. So when you start looking at what's happening there is you obviously have heard about Moore's Law a million years, right? And that's been doubling every 18 months, and we've heard it so many times our ears are falling off. It is about to end, though, and that's very interesting to understand because we're getting so close to the geometry of servers that an ASIC would actually have probably 128 cores, something like that. But we're already seeing that today is that in one rack view, probably this year, we'll see 128 cores with 2 sockets. So I'm not saying we're doing that, but we're looking into that. Here's the kicker. Why is that happening? AMD is a good example of why that's happening. And if you see those little connections there that have that infinity logo on there, that's actually a fabric that's built around the ASICs themselves. So there's a network in a modern server today. A multi-socketed server has a fabric in the box. And when you start looking at that, you can build some beastly machines, like 4-socket machine that's not even shipping today. But this is what's possible by expanding the fabric inside the sheet metal. We'll have like 128 lanes of PCIe Gen 4, and we have 256 cores of CPU and 16 terabytes of DRAM. This is not shipping yet, by the way. I want you to know this, but this is where this is going. So what you're beginning to see is Moore's Law is slowing down. We're cramming more and more stuff inside the server itself. And, of course, that then has a huge impact as to how we connect the server outside the sheet metal. We need to understand we need to have faster and faster networking. So right now already, high-end servers for high-performance computing goes out with 100 gigabit Ethernet, and we're going to 400 gigabit Ethernet very closely. That's already in the labs today. So you begin to see this. What are people doing with it, you might ask? Well, they're building software-defined data centers. They've learned from our friends Amazon and Google and the like, where basically you're doing rack after rack after rack for a lot of these new workloads that are coming. And if you look at those new workloads, what are they? They're not your classic email, okay? That's happening at human speeds. No, it's new HPC workloads. It's machine learning and artificial intelligence. That kind of stuff, right? Big data lakes, that kind of stuff, people begin to understand now how to mine data out of mine information, as it were, out of data. And these are the more data you have, the smarter you are. And a good example of that is self-driving cars, right? All the cars are reporting in to the data center. We are rerunning the neural network every night, and we're learning the new and more safer way to drive the cars. That requires a tremendous amount of performance and firepower. So you cannot have these multi-rack solutions being deployed with the networks we used to think of in client server and yesteryear, because the network will kill your productivity. So what does that really mean? Well, this is the thing. We're talking about this getting on the call today, that now everybody's working from home right now because we're all trying to stay away from this COVID-19 virus. And what we're finding is the networks are being tasked. And what we're finding is things are slowing down. We saw it earlier that the gigamon percentage, do we have some problems with spinning windows and stuff? That's exactly what you see every time you don't have enough throughput. And we all know this if we've been on the roads here in the Bay Area anytime, or any big metropolitan area. Hey, you know what? I have to call home and say, honey, I know it's my birthday. I know you've been cooking all day. I can't be home for dinner. And that normally is not met with friendliness on the home front. So slow down is a waste of time. Therefore, one needs to design for throughput. Something we haven't done historically in networking. So if you look at classic networking, we sort of fallen asleep a little bit. We've been going, oh, yeah, good practices, 10-to-1 oversubscription or 5-to-1 oversubscription. I saw an Arista presentation the other day where 3-to-1 oversubscription was considered cutting edge. I'm arguing, no, you forget all that, because what that you're basically saying is the probability of you staying local to your rack is better than going to another rack, which means I have to observe rack locality. That actually is not very good for my server utilization and my return on investment. What I really, really want is I want a data center fabric, server to server, rack to rack, that's zero blocking. I want all the bandwidth. And if you might say, well, you don't need it all the time. No, but I need it during peak hours. Interesting. So if we take a look at what's been typically going on, well, 10-to-1 looks like this. If I have just an example here of 8 racks, okay? 8 racks, well, 32 servers in each. If you add all those servers up at 25 gigabits, you're seeing 10-to-1 oversubscription. This means I have not 8 racks a resource. That's bad for me as a server vendor. What you have is 8 little islands where you have to sit and do Hadoop gymnastics, for example, just to stay rack local, only because you know if you cross the top of rack network, your performance will not be good, and therefore you have to know about your home rack. It's completely pointless. You should be able to do this instead. So this is where engineering and innovation comes in. If you get rid of the bandwidth limitations between racks, and basically you're arguing, hey, you know what? Whatever workload you're running in server rack 8 can easily run over to server rack 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever. We treat the whole thing as a unified resource pool. What you effectively have done is then transform your data center into one gigantic supercomputer. The network is now acting not so much as a communications network, but as a throughput network, which is a backplane for modern computing. This is pretty cool stuff. Now you start saying, well, wait a minute, do I really need that? And this is another misnomer I've come across in our industry. People say, well, I don't want to pay for it. I don't want to pay for the bandwidth. But if you look at the scalability, number of racks out of the x-axis here, you can see that the need for zero oversubscription starts happening rough around between 7 and 8 racks. So if you want to build a uniform rack where rack 1 is the same as rack 2 as rack 3 and 4 and 5, because you don't want snowflakes, you need to design not for for 2-to-1 oversubscription or 3-to-1 oversubscription. That's actually, you can see even with 2 racks, 2-to-1 oversubscription is a bare minimum. So what we're arguing here is there's a huge ROI being wasted because people basically are buying powerful servers, putting them in racks, and they're finding out, hey, you know what? At scale, I can't actually utilize them. I was talking to a very large customer of ours recently, and they go, dude, we're at 20 to 30% rack utilization, and we can't seem to get out of it. And that's particularly a problem, not when you're growing your business and throwing money at it, but when you have a downturn in the economy where you have to actually squeeze more resource out of the service you already bought. You can't sit there and say, I don't know what it is, but I can't get better utilization. And you all had this example where someone has gone down to the data center and physically removed a server that was free to another rack where it was needed. Are you nuts? This is completely crazy. You should be able to pool your server resources and then manage to 80% with 20% in reserve. Now, if you do this, there's a huge improvement in ROI. In other words, the more oversubscription you've had in the past, if you get rid of that, the more upside there is in the future for you. What you also get is linear scaling. That's what everybody wants, right? The first rack, the second rack, the third rack, the fourth rack, I don't care. It all works. So that's the business need for doing this. So now comes the question, how do we do it? Well, we got to get rid of leaf and spine. You saw Gigamon's slides earlier, the complexity, the craziness of leaf, spine, and then the main routers at the top with the firewalls. We can keep those because that protects our data center. But how about this? How about we wire the top of rack switches directly to each other and create essentially what we call a composable fabric that's built for throughput? If you can do that, you are basically innovating on topology. That's pretty cool. So how do we do this? Well, we created essentially 3 little machines here. There is a 100-gig version, there's a 10-gig version, and there's a 25-gig version, and that's all there is. There is no complexity. These are you pick whatever speed you're willing to pay for. I mean, I personally would like to pick the 100-gig one because I think that's a sexy machine, and then you put that in the top of rack. Now, then the difference here is that this is innovative because it is actually software-defined networking. So the software-defined networking means there is actually a virtual machine that runs the entire fabric for you. There's intelligence that oversees the entire topology and also knows whether or not you have an HPE server running on the fabric and also knows what VMs or what containers are running. So we have integrated all this. We are aware of the machine you're running because we have ILO integration. That's Integrated Lights Out Manager for those that may not know that acronym. And then there's the notion of, hey, we actually integrate with VMware API, with Nutanix APIs, with Docker APIs because we're really a DevOps entity. We're managing this whole thing as a holistic system. So what does that mean? Does that mean you cannot use like storage arrays if you like to do that, like Nimble? No, anything that speeds Ethernet you can use. So you're building essentially a systems fabric that can run anything you want, not a fiber channel SAN or anything else like that, or InfiniBand. Out with that, we can all standardize on Ethernet. So what you're probably asking yourself is, how do I actually build something with this? So let me show this real quick. I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'm talking fast. But we're building out in rows like in a data center. And from the middle switch you saw here, I'm actually building to the left and to the right with a straight shot. There's no spine switches in this drawing. And if I do this sort of to the left or the right of me, I can certainly also do it to the front and the back of me from the perspective of that first rack I started with. And then I start scaling my network. And of course, if I'm scaling in 2 dimensions as what I'm doing here, holy cow, it didn't take long before just a 32-port switch can scale super large for a very, very large data center. Incidentally, it's funny enough, this was all part of the Plexi acquisition. We have been doing this for several years, and it turns out the only other people who do something like this is Cray Systems with their Dragonfly fabric. Looks very similar. And, of course, that's in the high-performance computing space they're coming at it. So we're doing essentially supercomputing stuff, innovative stuff, on networking to build a gigantic mega system. This entire system you're looking at here of 5,184 nodes is acting as one humongous supercomputer, and that's available today. Pretty cool stuff. Now, what can you do with this? Well, you obviously want to run multiple workloads, so you want to segment this fabric. So think of this as a segmentable underlay. Where you can run whatever you want overlay-like, right? You can actually run whatever IP segmentation you want on top of this underlay. But this underlay is enforced on the fabric, so you can have an ad hoc island for Hadoop, an ad hoc island. These are not physical islands; they are logical islands, and you can move them around as your business needs change over time. All right, so you get this. Okay, so how do you do this? So I'll give you a quick, super fast class. Can you build a 3D fabric? Yes. In 30 seconds, you guys will all be 3D fabric Einsteins, okay? So I give you 3 switches and 3 wires. Could you build this? And I know you can't answer, but you probably answer saying, yeah, dude, that's easy. Okay, great. So why don't we do this? Let's do that 3 times. And you would say, but that's 3 islands, Dennis. That's no fabric. Okay, so what if I give you another set of cables? You build in another dimension. Now you have essentially what looks like a Rubik's Cube that's exploded out, right? There are 9 little switches connected here. But if you can build this, which I hope you would say, yes, I can, then I can actually do it 3 times and then give you more wires. And now I'm actually building in 3 dimensions. Did you catch that? Not just 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions. So you start saying, but wait a minute, what if you only use 6 ports on the fabric switch here? What if I want to use another 2 ports? Well, we can build in a 4th dimension. How do we do that? We repeat the same recipe and build that 3 times, and then we cross-connect that. And bingo, all of a sudden, I have 81 switches, 3,888 ports in the nice little 4-dimensional fabric. Incidentally, you can scale this in as many dimensions as you have ports. That probably at this point hopefully gave you some new insights and ideas. So let me just show you how you deploy. You start with the server, then you figure out what NIC to put in, then you decide, hey, how many of these servers am I going to put in the rack? We basically standardize your rack here, but every time you add a server, you need the throughput of that server, none of this oversubscription stuff, right? That's what we talked about. So I add 2 switches for redundancy. Here's 2 times 400 gig. That's 400 gig, 400 gig. Good, excellent. And now I'm good to go. I can actually take that, put it in a rack, and scale it horizontally. That's how easy it is. Anybody here who is on this call can take the cables and build this today, and it is shipping. It is not future stuff. We've been shipping this for 2 years now. What's the benefit, you might ask? Well, I can, instead of having my workload sitting in a stovepipe, I can now rule it around the pool. So I'm no longer worrying about rack locality. You got it. Now, if you're a CFO, you don't care about this. I hope you have a few folks who are financially inclined on the call. So what happens when you can actually pool your resources, instead of getting choppy, poorly utilized resources, like I mentioned earlier, you can now use it and manage it as one gigantic pool where you are setting the dial to as much utilization as you like. I would prefer 80%, so you have 20% in reserve. Okay, so you get this. So the whole idea is, the way we do this, we're application aware. I was glad to hear Gigamon saying this. We're application aware. We actually built an affinity, which is a group of servers and virtual machines that need to live together. And then we tell the fabric to go fix that. And what we call that is fitting. So that's how we actually let the system self-optimize based on whatever workload mix you're running on the fabric. Pretty cool stuff. There's a lot of benefits here, but there's also API integration. So, of course, VMware, like I mentioned before, Nutanix, Kubernetes, all that is API integrated. That's how we understand who is running on us. But if you want to poke at us, if you want to basically get the fabric to do things, Chef and Puppet and all that stuff is integrated, Ansible, Splunk, the whole thing. You can do anything you want because we have a Stackstorm bus that makes that all work. Okay, cool. So now you get it. Let me give you a quick tour through this. Let me just log in and give you just a flavor for how easy this is. Of course, there is a GUI here, and this is our dashboard. And let's take a look at the fabric. And there's the fabric. There's 9 switches in this one. And let's just take a look at how we visualize that. Notice how it's done here in sort of a bandwidth pooling capability. And that's another thing I want to tell you guys. When you manage it this way, you manage to get this whole system. Every single switch is a contributor to the collective bandwidth of the entire group. And let me show you how that looks. If I click here, you can see there's a workload between rack 1 and rack 2, and there's purple. Okay, so those cats are actually talking. You see the ports lit up on the right. Okay, what else? I want to see who's talking. Well, it turns out it's Wilma here that's actually talking. There's evidently here, let's take a look. What we have here's our NIC. There's a vSwitch there. There's a port group. And on the right, there's actually a virtual machine. Okay, so that virtual machine is now talking across the fabric to the Fred server underneath. You can see here there's a virtual machine database. There's an in-memory database. And these guys are pounding data back and forth as fast as they can. So you could run into a problem where the bandwidth between the two is not enough. How do you get more bandwidth? Well, the way you get more bandwidth is you steal it from, or borrow it, I should say, from another rack because we treat all the available bandwidth as a pool. So because when we do this, check this out, now I all of a sudden doubled my link bandwidth between the racks, and I did that as a function of borrowing from rack 3, and everything's back to normal. Now notice how much more gray matter I have here I can use for other workloads. So to give an example, what if I in rack 9 had a huge backup where a ton of servers are pounding the crap out of rack 8? Well, then I need all the link aggregation I can possibly muster. And I do that by borrowing a little sliver. You can follow the green lines here, a little sliver from each of the other racks. And when I do that, guess what happens? Now I'm not having fixed leaf and spine where I may not have the links. The links here are used in a plastic form, so I can add or subtract links as I need, as my workload it behaves over time, or a mix of workloads, I should say. So let me give you a quick example. Let's do 15,000 virtual machines. Here's one of those machines like we're shipping today that can easily do 128 machines, and you can see the recipe here. All you need to worry about is, hey, we take all that, stick it in a rack. We have 8 per line extra servers sitting around for a spike, right, for as an extra budget for any spike like we would have now, 2 top-of-rack switches, and essentially a uniform building block. Okay, got that. Now, what can you do with that? Well, as I mentioned, you manage that all through the Composable Fabric Manager. And then here's what you say. You can see you can actually, between the workloads like, for example, a vSAN workload, they can be segregated away from all the other stuff. So what you have is essentially a concept of a building block that starts in 300 VM increments in this example. So we got to go 600, 900, 1,200, 1,000, I should say, 3,000, 6,000, 9,000, 12,000, 15,000, right? You can just scale and go on and on and on. And what you don't have to worry about anymore is whether your network is up to the job. Because every time you add another rack, you get more bandwidth, you get more ports, you're scaling out your fabric. And this is the way that actually looks. In this case here, doubling up on this is 5 racks, doubling up on 2 times 100 gig because we had essentially 160 nodes on this. Unbelievable amount of firepower, no spine switches in sight, and everything managed through central intelligent management as a pool. So you get this, so you start saying, well, how do I connect this to my existing network? Well, you're treating this essentially as a top-of-rack composable fabric that takes all your racks together as one big mega computer, and then you connect that with as many links as you need to the core switches to connect to the WAN or campus or internet. So there's no difference here. This is using standard Ethernet. It's layer 2, layer 3, stuff you're familiar with. All right, cool. So what's the benefit here? Well, the benefit is if you can utilize your servers better, the competition is actually sitting here going, dude, I need to sell you more servers. And what we're saying is, no, we utilize the servers you buy better so we can actually save you some cost. Pretty cool stuff. So that's a better way to run VMware, and for that matter, any other workload, because you treat the servers and the network as a system. So here's the evolution, right? You can see it. We used to have leaf and spine all across in the past, right? And then you collapsed essentially what was separate storage into flash drives in the actual servers, and now what we have collapsed is the spine switches out. So I'm about to wrap up here. So that's about it. The composable fabric is a systems interconnect, again, across Synergy, across composable rack servers, and anything we do HCI. Whatever flavor you want, composable fabric is there to build your next generation innovative networking. And I think if Albert Einstein heard this presentation, if he was still with us, he may have been listening in from the cloud, we don't know. But he said he would probably say, he used to say everything needs to be made as simple as possible. So here we are. Every server fabric should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. So that's it for me. Thank you very much, guys, and I will open for Q&A and stop sharing here as fast as I can.
Excellent presentation, Dennis. Very cool, very mind-blowing stuff. So while we do some Q&A, I'm going to bring up our audience poll. All right,
we do on time. I spoke as fast as I could.
it was fast-paced, energetic. I loved it. Lots of cool graphics. We got a lot of good feedback. The poll question on the screen now, what additional information would you like about the HPE solution? We'll just leave that up. Let's see. Lawrence has a few questions here. He's asking for some clarification. He said the slide showed almost 4,000 ports for 81 racks. Can you clarify how cabling and ports work in the data center?
Oh, absolutely. I'd be glad to answer that. Obviously, building something that big and ambitious is going to require some cable management. And for that, we have sort of a patch panel solution, which is passive glass. But it makes it a lot easier just to essentially add that for a handful of rows, and then you just punch into that. So the wiring is handled through a predefined box of glass, if you will, and that allows you to scale in those 2 dimensions that I mentioned. If you look inside the rack, what I showed you there was as dense as we can build it today, right? Just to dial the knob to 11. When you look at something like the 2600 server from HPE, it's a 2U high form factor with 4 servers inside. Now, if each of those servers had essentially a 25 gig port, what you would do is each server would have a 100 gig port to 4 splitter in terms of cabling, and then you would use half the ports on the 32 port switch times 2 on top. So what you essentially will do, if you can imagine, it'll be a 2600 with 4 little servers and 1 sheet metal, right? They're essentially pluggable servers. They're little lunch boxes you can pull out, right? And it has 24 drive slots in the front. So what you would do is you would take this 400 gig that splits the 100 gig pipe into 4 25 gig, and you'll just plug them into each of the NICs on each of these 4 servers, and then that port goes up to the top of rack switch, and then you start going, well, I have 16 of those. Now, if you have 16 of those in one rack, assuming your power and cooling budget can handle that, and that's an assumption, I don't know, but let's say it can, then what you essentially will have is 64 server entities in one rack with a total firepower of 32 100 gig ports divided by 2. So, 1,600 gigabits of bandwidth leaving the rack. And as you saw in my example, I split that in 2 dimensions, in 8, 4 to the left, 4 to the right. And we do that in that dimension. It's essentially a mesh in a horizontal dimension. And then in a vertical dimension, if you will, there is another 8 ports for a mesh in that direction. So when you actually take 8 times 8, that's how you get 81. Hopefully that helped clarify.
Wow, very cool. And you answered his follow-up question, which was, is this mesh or fabric?
Yeah, it's mesh, you see, and so fabric is sort of a loose term. Right? You can use fabric for everything, but meshes are superior because meshes can be pooled, as I illustrated, and meshes can be managed centrally because every port on a mesh is essentially equal. Right? So what's so cool about it is a lot of people are nervous about hop count, but you can actually do a 2-dimensional mesh where you are hopping essentially no more than 3 in most cases. Well, if you need a lot of bandwidth, you can actually hop around a lot more, but notice I said you need a bandwidth, then you are latency tolerant. So you can differentiate on latency tolerance and bandwidth needs, and you can manage that all centrally. So that would be very difficult to do in leaf and spine. Why? Because leaf and spine not only does have oversubscription, which we hate, right? The second thing that also has is equal cost multipathing, which basically says, I don't know anything about the workloads. I just do round robin. And I'm hoping, catch as catch can, that I have all the right wires connected and all the right workloads are going down the right wire. But you know that that's not happening because we are not managing the bandwidth with any idea what the workload is. So what ends up happening is that the equal cost multipathing can end up losing. Let's say it had 4 links going to the spine, but it can actually send everything down link 1. And the 3 other ones are just sitting around twiddling their thumbs. Why? Because the algorithm equal cost multipathing is not application aware. We are. So we can manage the network dynamically this way. And then again, there is no pooling of bandwidth in a leaf and spine. So we have to let go of leaf and spine. You can think of it this way, as you saw from my graphics. Leaf and spine is still there, but it's done as a distributed logical spine switch. I use the other switches in my mesh as a spine switch on a temporary basis under software and application control. So, by the way, for those of you who sit there and scratch their heads on this one going, how's that possible with spanning tree? And the answer is, I never said spanning tree, right? Because there's no need for spanning tree when you have a central controller that orchestrates all the switches. So we are turning spanning tree off, and that makes meshes cool again.
I like it. Cool again. Another question here. Alex is asking if they could get away with a less significant core as most traffic becomes east-west.
Oh, I love you, man. Alex does it. You get. If I could do anything, you should get the Amazon gift card for that one because you're spot on. Because what really is happening is when you're connecting the top of rack switches to each other, creating essentially an intelligent backplane for all the servers, which is why we call the server fabric. Then guess what? You don't need to leave the 10 racks you have. You're talking amongst yourselves, right? You're brokering essentially a machine learning workload or an AI workload or even a Hadoop workload, right? In Hadoop, for example, you don't need 3-way copies anymore. You just need to copy to any of the other nodes, and hopefully you shouldn't do it in your home rack. but you don't need to have 2 nodes in a home rack just to stave off crappy network performance because you have all the performance here you want. So you're spot on. You are basically arguing, hey, man, if I design my network, my data center, my next generation data center, as a high-performance supercomputer, then I don't need to worry about network bottlenecks. So, Alex, awesome question, man. You're right on. I don't need to go to the core unless I'm leaving my cluster. And the moment I leave my cluster, that's probably a good reason to leave the core. Leave the mesh, right? But you're staying mesh local all along until you go, oh, time for me to go campus, or somebody's pinging me from the outside world. That's fine. And you mentioned, by the way, you saw my little drawing. You figure out how much you need there, and you just pick some of the free ports on the fabric, and you just take a couple of the fabric switches up and stick them into the core. So think of it this way. This makes it maybe a little easier. So even though I have 20 racks, it's working as one gigantic top-of-rack switch. So the way you normally would connect a top-of-rack switch to the core is the way you connect here. But everything else stays rack local. Awesome question. Thank you.
Very nice. Very nice. Another question here, is this possible with older servers like DL380 or 580?
Oh, great question. Yes. So, of course it is, because all we are requiring, and it's funny because sometimes we blow people's minds so much with this, they go, ooh, this must be proprietary. No, it isn't. It's 100% Ethernet. We're using Broadcom chips. We're just being clever about how we use them. So here's the kicker, okay? Any old server you have sitting around, or dare I say any competitor server that you bought that maybe you should have bought from HPE but you didn't, and that's okay. We love you anyway. You can connect that up to this composable fabric and get the benefits. What you will not get, of course, is the discovery of the hardware through the ILO integration. That we can only do on our own gear. But let's say you have some Super Micro machines or Dell machines. If they speak Ethernet, man, you're good to go.
Awesome. I like that. We love you anyway. Another question here. How is the composable fabric attached to my core data center network? Did you cover that one already?
Yes, I did. So just imagine you have a core data center where you basically have a couple of big chassis switches with all the routing and internet, and you have things like load balancers there. You have things like firewalls there, right? That's a security perimeter to the data center. The way you connect it up, if you let's say we just took five racks, so 10 top-of-rack switches, right? What you would typically do is, like, let's say you want to make sure that you at least give an egress to all the racks. Then you will just take one wire from each individual switch and then connect it to the core ports, and that's it. No leaf and spine, no nothing. So this is actually what blows most people's mind when they're like data center network folks. They go, what do you mean? It's not a 3-tiered data center? No, it's not. There's only 2. There's your core data center switch and routing in the top, and with all your perimeter of security, and then the rest is just rack locality, man. It's basically we just basically get the top of rack switch to do all the work for you, and so that's it. Buy the rack, build the racks like I showed you, 2 top of rack switch composable fabric switches, and then connect them up to the core for whatever bandwidth you think you need in and out of that particular cluster of racks.
Very nice. And then, let's see, last question here we probably have time for. If I don't need spine switches with a composable fabric, how much money do I save and why?
Oh, that's a great question. So of course, you have to pay for the software, and that depends. That's licensed on a port basis. But if you were to here's the thing, right? Let me explain a little quick. So if you build a leaf and spine fabric, which with the way we all have been used to doing it until this moment, right? The way you do it is you say, wait a minute, I'm going to take a transceiver, which is expensive. So let's say $500, $1,000, and then I connect it with some glass up to the spine switch that I have in my data center, and that's another transceiver. And then to get to the other rack next to me, I cross another transceiver and another transceiver, right? So just to get from one rack to the rack next to me, I cross 4 transceivers. With us, you only cross 2 transceivers. Whoa, hold the phone. And the cost of the spine switch is going out? Yep. So if I was to say to you, but we still have to charge you for the software. So let's say for fun and games here on the phone, that the cost of the spine switches is sort of what I charge you for the software to get the top of rack switches to do this. What am I really saving? Well, you're saving half the darn transceivers. And also, of course, half the ports. There is no spine, right? So you're just shooting direct shots, rack to rack to rack to rack. And so with us, you only go across 1 transceiver and over to the other rack and hit another transceiver, and boom, you're down talking to the node. So half the transceivers. So if you look at the cost of any network, right, you would argue, yeah, transceiver cost adds up, especially if I'm building for high throughput. So this makes high throughput essentially affordable. You get twice the throughput for the same money. Think of it that way. Or half the cost for the same throughput. So,
very impressive. Very impressive. I like this economic formula here you've got going. Well, it's been really cool. Let's see, Jason out there in the audience said, this gentleman is awesome. So we got lots of good feedback on your presentation. Really love the energy and really loved how this might actually save them money and gain efficiency in their data centers. So thank you so much for being on the event today, Dennis.
Hey, my pleasure, guys. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you. And for more information on this HPE solution, there's a PDF right there that you can download in your audience console that covers everything you need to know about the HPE composable fabric. It's entitled Data Center Fabric Explained, and there's a ton of additional information in there. Of course, you can always visit hpe.com for more information. All right, and with that, it's time for our final gift card on today's event. I'm sorry, the Flexential presenter had an emergency and wasn't able to join us on the event today, but we hope to have them, or we will have them on an upcoming event. So that was the final presentation on the event today, and we are announcing the final gift card winner. That's going to Victor Grotto from California. Congratulations, Victor Grotto from California, as well as our other two gift card winners on the event today. I hope that you enjoyed the event. Before you go, I want to remind you to follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to our 10 on Tech podcast over in the iTunes store. If you're interested in sponsoring an upcoming event, reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com, and we would love to have you on an upcoming megacast. I hope that you'll join us on our next shared event. That is a panel cast discussion on key trends and observations in information security. That's happening on Wednesday, March the 25th. That is a video panel discussion. It should be a lot of fun. Hope to see you there. After this event, you'll be automatically redirected to events.actualtechmedia.com to learn more about all of our upcoming events. I hope everyone had a great day and enjoyed today's Networking EcoCast. I know I did. See you on the next event, and take care. Bye-bye.